Want to ride your best ultra race ever? In this second episode, I speak to Jacques Janse van Rensburg, multiple Grand Tour finisher, to find out how he rides far and fast. Stay tuned to find out how you can too. Joining me today is Jacques Janse van Rensburg, who is a well-known cyclist from South Africa. Jacques has spent about 10 years riding as a pro cyclist in Europe, a good chunk of that on the world tour with well-known teams. He competed in three different Grand Tours, all the Grand Tours in Europe. He's a multiple South African road cycling champion and has completed the Cape Epic 3 times in top 10 positions. So nobody's better qualified today to speak to us and share with us his experience with ultra racing, long days in the saddle, and we look forward to hearing from you, Jacques. Jacques, welcome to the Pembe Show. And where are you? Where do you find yourself today?
Yeah, thanks, Cole, and thanks for having me. And at the moment I'm in Oudtshoorn. We're doing the Quas Extreme Ultra Marathon mountain bike race. It is around 120 k's rough terrain riding with about 3,000 meters of altitude gain. Winning time looking at over 5 hours for the first rider. So yeah, definitely one of the toughest one-day mountain bike races in the country.
Well, Jacques, we wish you well with that, and thank you for taking the time out to join us today. Sure. Let's jump straight in. And the topic today is ultra riding. And with ultra, we're talking Transpaviance, Race to the Sun, Cullen Tonteldoos, those long rides that take even the top riders, 8 to 10 hours, and of course the slow riders even longer. And with Paviance coming up next weekend, it's very topical. I think people would be keen to hear your views. So let's jump straight in and talk about preparation. I mean, how do you taper leading up to a big long distance race like that?
Yeah, so you would be looking at decreasing your training volume with about 30% from around 10 days before the event. Obviously, it depends on the different type of programs. Everyone is on a different type of program and where you are, what region you are in your program. So yeah, definitely with about 10 days to go before the race, you start decreasing the total training volume. And obviously with ultra riding, you're not really going to be working on intensity. So usually how it works is you decrease the total training volume and then you increase the intensity. But with ultra riding, and also depends on the caliber of rider, if you're a general rider, if you're a racing snake, or just someone that wants to have fun and complete the event. So I guess most of the people obviously doing these ultra events, it's going to last you more than 10 hours riding time. You won't be doing too much of that intensity aspect of it. So just decreasing the training time from about 10 days before the race with 30% to what you would have been doing obviously in the previous weeks. And then, obviously the day before the race, you also still want to be riding. You see a lot of people that completely take off the day before the race, which is definitely not good to do. The body goes into a recovery mode, and then once you hit the race day, then it takes you about a couple of hours to get those muscles up to feeling as what they would have been if you just had a 1 hour easy ride or pre-race ride before the event. So yeah, I would say 2 days before the event, you can do a 1 hour recovery ride. And then the day before the event, also a 1 hour ride. And then maybe 2 to 3 efforts, 3 minutes in length, but that varies on personal preference. So let's say about 70% intensity, 80% intensity, not over your threshold or your threshold heart rate or power. So definitely still keep riding that day before and 2 days before. And then maybe 3 or 4 days before, also doing a longer ride. Just to keep that correct energy system activated for the big endurance event that's lying ahead. So let's say 4 days before the event, also still try and do a 4 or 5 hour ride, just endurance pace, what you wanted to be doing in the event.
Right. So Jacques, in the old days, we used to have a specific diet regime that we followed in. Like for 3 days, we would only eat protein, and then the last 2 days carbohydrates. I don't think I'm not sure if people still follow a kind of eating taper like that. But let's talk about specifically the day before. What do you eat and drink the day before to make sure that you're completely topped up for race day?
Yeah, you more or less hit the hammer on the head with the protein and the carbohydrates there. But definitely, I would just say normal eating habits up until the day before the race, and then finish your protein intake the day before the race or before the last day. So 2 days before the race, you can finish your protein intake. And then the day before the race, you mostly want to intake carbohydrates,
right,
and then maybe some electrolyte drinks just to top up on the electrolyte stores as well. Depends on the weather of the race. If it's going to be a very hot race, then you obviously want it to have extra energy, extra electrolyte stores in your body before the race. So yeah, mostly the day before the race, carbohydrates, and then your electrolytes.
So what's your favorite? Sorry, carry on.
You can also add maybe, I don't know, it depends on the type of training that a person would have been doing, but if you familiar with the fat oxidation, where at lower heart rates your body burns fat instead of carbohydrates, that obviously takes quite a bit of time to train into your body. The way that you can do that is when you do longer rides, obviously on easier intensity, you want to go out that's obviously only training and easy rides, nothing to do with racing. You go out in your ride in a fasted state. So then you basically teach your body to use more of your fat stores for energy. So that's obviously that you will have to work in months before into your training. And then obviously the day before you can eat your carbohydrates and then a lot of fatty acids, basically like your avocado oil, coconut oils, more or less similar things to like that. So then that's obviously a lot more energy can come from your fat than from carbohydrates.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely also something that someone can look at if they're interested in something like that.
So Jacques, what are you planning to eat tomorrow night, the evening before the race, before Atokwas?
Yeah, a big bowl of pasta. yeah, just carbohydrates. Yeah, olive oil, pasta with olive oil, and like Alfredo pasta.
Right.
As long as there's a lot of pasta and that's about it.
And no alcohol.
No, definitely not. No.
Jacques, and then let's jump ahead to race day and stay on the topic of eating and drinking. What do you, how do you kind of top yourself up and eat and drink in the morning, let's say the hour or two before race start?
Yes, so the hour before the race start, so obviously in the morning when you wake up, you would have your, what you normally would have before training. Obviously just try and eat a bit extra because it's going to be a long day. Obviously your oats or your pronitro, whatever porridge you would be using, mainly consisting of carbohydrates, obviously. And then you can also add a bit of protein with that in the morning before the race. Just maybe 1 or 2 baked eggs or boiled eggs. That also helps. I think the protein just helps a bit just to protect the muscles. Once they get completely depleted, then you have that extra bit of protein in the morning before the race. It also helps with the carbohydrates uptake into the muscles, the little bit of protein that there is. And then, with about an hour before the race, just what you can do is if you can maybe have one of your bottles that carbohydrate mix bottles that you would be having in the race, or just 500 to 700 mils of water with an electrolyte tablet, fizzy tablet that goes into that.
Yeah.
So not too much. Yeah, you can maybe have a banana also an hour before the race. But you want to have the bulk of your carbohydrate intake with about 2.5 to 3 hours before the race, so that it has the time to get absorbed into the muscles.
So between Friday night and race day on Saturday morning, plenty of carbohydrates to make sure that the reserves have been topped up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Carbohydrates is the main thing in the ultra endurance events, and just to keep topping up that energy stores, the carbohydrate energy stores throughout the ride to help you from hitting the wall. That's the most important thing in these ultra events.
Jacques, and when once the gun goes, how do you what is your kind of eating approach with regard to, obviously you're not going to take a gel in the first 5 minutes, but how do you balance your eat plan, from, let's say, the first, how quickly do you eat, and then why do you eat, and how do you eat for the next, let's say, 8 to 10 hours?
Okay, you can definitely starting within an hour after the start, eating little bits. I would say in terms of what you're going to be eating, definitely try and start with normal foods. What maybe banana bread, Christmas cake, little ham sandwiches, even small boiled baby potatoes with a bit of salt on them. All the natural foods that consist of carbohydrates that you can ingest in the first couple of hours of the event. Then throughout the event, you can go over halfway, or after halfway, you can start having energy bars if you've obviously finished the other types of foods. And then your energy gels you would only want to be having in the last, I don't know, for 20% of the race.
Right.
Just to, because obviously depends on person to person, you start to struggle to ingest solids. So depending on your fatigue levels, it's obviously easier to ingest a gel than to eat a sandwich or something like that. So definitely try and stick with the energy gels only in the last part of the event, and then normal foods in the beginning. And you would probably looking at taking up to around 40 grams of carbohydrates in your food per hour. And then obviously you have your energy carbohydrate mix in a bottle, or whether it be a backpack, also around 20 to 30 grams per hour of carbohydrates that you want to drink from your energy drink. That's about it, And then every hour you want to top up, obviously, with that,
So while we're on that point, do you carry a backpack for extra drinking, or do you just use water bottles?
It depends obviously on the race, how far the feed zones are apart. If you maybe a race like Cullinan to Tontelduis, I think the feed zones were about 50 or 55 to 60 k's apart. So that was quite a long stretch, where it depends on obviously the caliber of rider that you are. It can take from up to 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours between checkpoints. So I would say if it's more than an hour, depends if you can take 1 or 2 bottles on your bike. But if it's more than an hour and a half to 2 hours between the tech zones, definitely rather a backpack on the back, and then you can still put one small little bottle on the bike as well, because some of those backpacks can take up to 3 liters, where you can only carry around 1.5 liters on your bike. So definitely analyze the race, the specific race that you're going to be doing, and then the time between the checkpoints. So definitely I would say if it's more than for the average rider that wants to compete in an event, if it's more than 40 k's between the feed zones, definitely rather also have a backpack on the back.
Jacques, then how often do you stop, and how long do you stop? So I guess you don't quite stop to do the dancing with the music party thing if you're at the front of the pack. So how often would you stop?
When you stop, definitely not try and stop for too long. I would say, let's say around, obviously, until you've gotten what you needed to get from the feed zone, in terms of your food and your carbohydrates. And then you can have a bit of a break, let's say 5 to 10 minutes, not more. I wouldn't stop more than 10 minutes. In Cullinan to Tontelduis, it was quite stressful in the beginning, so we stopped really quickly. It was about a 1 minute stop, and everyone was still racing. Everyone had a lot of energy, so it was quick stops. And then I made the mistake actually of I think it was the third or the fourth check zone that I just started to ride away from the other people, and I was in the zone and I completely missed the checkpoint. And then I was already on the limit a bit with my food that I had with me, and I missed that check zone. So yeah, I had another 40 Ks, and it was left. And it was the hardest part of Cullinan to Tonteldoos. So it was basically 40K uphill that I had to do before I could get to the next exam. So yeah, I would say if it's an average rider, definitely stop at every tech zone. It doesn't matter if you still have some stuff left in your back pocket. You always see something that you might like at the tech zone, and it's just a bit of a mental break from the race.
Like ice cream.
And then yeah, yeah. So definitely, stop at every tech zone, and then just make sure that you're filled up with liquids and food for the until the next tech zone. Yeah, and then not try and stop for too long. You don't want the body going into a recovery mode and something like that. So yeah.
Jacques, and then okay, we've covered the backpack. Let's talk a bit about equipment. Do you full suspension, hardtail, gravel bike, or how do you approach that? Horses for courses, and maybe what are you riding this weekend for Atterquas?
Yeah, so that also obviously depends on the route. With Cullinan to Tonteldoos, I was very smart in the day before going to check out 100 Ks of the route, and I was a bit stressed because this gravel bike is a new thing in South Africa, and it's a big hype about it and all that. And I was a bit stressed because I only have a mountain bike, a dual suspension Norco mountain bike. So I was a bit stressed, and I went to recon the stage or the race, 100 Ks of it. And then I was so glad that I did it. And I knew that the mountain bike, the dual suspension mountain bike on that specific race was going to be better. So the way to choose your bike is definitely to try and see if you can go look at parts of the routes maybe a week before, the day before, whatever, if you're close to the race, staying at a hotel or something. But then obviously you would need to take both bikes with you. But maybe some footage of the previous years that can help you see the type of terrain that you're going to be riding. That will also help a lot. And then I've ridden Cullinan to Tonteldoos and the race to the Sun. That was two completely different types of ultra gravel events, as they call it. And the race to the Sun was, everyone was saying 100% gravel bike, and I finished third on a mountain bike within 10 seconds of the winner, which is my teammate Nickel, and he rode on a gravel bike. So both of those bikes were good for that race on that day. So there's parts obviously where the gravel bikes are a bit faster, but I mean, if you're in a group or a big bunch with the slipstream effect, the mountain bike was just fine.
I was just going to ask you about Race to the Sun. If you next year, if you're gonna do, because I think all the other four guys with you in the final like 10 Ks were on gravel bikes. Yes. Are you going to stick to the mountain bike or gravel bike next year for Race to the Sun?
I think it's still a big question for me, that one.
Really
I don't know. I was quite comfortable on my mountain bike, and there were parts where the mountain bike was better. I didn't have to stress so much about saving my tires because I had the suspension, and there's really rough parts where I could use the suspension, not pushing too hard on the tires. So obviously, that last 20 Ks in Race to the Sun is their tar section. So they couldn't ride away from me there, but I couldn't win the race there because I couldn't get away from them there.
Right.
So that's probably where the gravel bike would have been better for me to try and get away there. But I didn't win the race there, but I also didn't lose the race there. So for the average rider, I would say in a race like Cullinan to Tonteldoos or now the new race, what's coming up now this weekend, you said, or next weekend?
Baviaans?
Yes, Baviaans. So for that race, I would definitely say mountain bike, hardtail or dual suspension. There's no big difference really between the hardtail and the dual suspension, and it's mostly downhill There's a little bit of climbing throughout the halfway of the race, but it's a lot of downhill riding. And then, yeah, you can, for the average rider, you don't have to stress about sand patches and rocks and saving the tires. So definitely mountain bike dual suspension now.
Jacques, just to clarify for you, for that little hill in Baviaans that you're talking about, I guess from a perspective of a professional a bicycle rider, it may be a little hill. For most amateurs, that's like the biggest obstacle in all of Baviaans.
Yeah. I mean, if you're pacing yourself correctly and you're not going close to your, I think that's another question that's going to come up, and that's what is a good explanation, is how to pace yourself in the race.
Yeah.
So I would say for the average rider, definitely not obviously going even near your threshold heart rate. So that's around 85% of your max heart rate. So you don't want to even go near that within the first 75% of the race. So yeah, I see a lot of people made a big mistake in Cullinan to Tontville to try and stick with a big group in the beginning up small little hills. And they push themselves 85, 90, 95%, even some 100% of their maximum heart rates. So that's where you start getting your lactic acid into your legs. And then, I mean, you still got 200 Ks left to do. And so if you start doing that in the first 20% of the race, you're definitely going to pay the price at the end, and where you may be going to lose 10, 15 minutes not riding with a group in the first 2 hours of the race. You're going to lose 2-3 hours in the last 2 hours or last 50, 60 Ks of the race because you pushed yourself too hard in the beginning. So definitely ride within yourself in the beginning. I would say not more than 75% of your max heart rate. Just try and stick around 70%, even 65% within the first 100 Ks of the race.
Jacques, do you use heart rate or power meter to pace yourself?
Yeah, so I have both. So in the beginning, I pace myself on. It's difficult. I haven't done so much of the big ultra events, so I usually. It's difficult. Obviously, if you're racing in the front, you want to stay with the front guys. So yeah, in the beginning, I'll check power and heart rate. So obviously, I have a threshold heart rate and power, but yeah, I also check power in the beginning, and then when I see the power is okay, and it depends on the weather conditions, whether if the heart rate can go a bit higher in hotter conditions, I also don't want to go above 85% of my heart rate. So whether it's that heart rate zone or the power zone, I just try and stay below threshold. So yeah, even if you're close to threshold, it's also for extended periods of times, it's definitely not good to do that in the beginning of the race. So in Cullinan to Tontville, I just sat in the bunch, never saw the front of the race for the first 150 Ks.
Yeah.
And that definitely helped me in the end, because I rode at around 70% of heart rate in some of the hardest sections. So, yeah.
Jacques, you've mentioned threshold a couple of times. For a rider who doesn't exactly know what his threshold is, and maybe uses heart rate. You mentioned 85%. What about something that I spoke with Jaco Ferreira about last night is actually that lactic acid burn. I mean, what is that? How do I use those burning legs, that sensation when my legs start burning like acid? How does that, is that an indicator of threshold? So if I start feeling my legs, I need to know that I'm probably going too much in the red.
Yeah, so if you're already starting to feel your legs, it means that you've definitely gone too hard for already an extended period of time.
Yeah.
In terms of your right perceived exertion, if you say if you have a level from 1 to 5, with 5 having that burning sensation, and 1 just being, obviously, if you'd say riding from your garage to your front gate, that would be 1.
Yeah.
So just as easy as you can without falling over, you would probably want to be riding at let's say a 2, between 2 and 3. That's where you want to be riding in your first 100 Ks of the race.
Yeah.
So yeah, so definitely a very easy, not very easy tempo. Obviously, you don't want to be riding for days to come, but yeah, just that steady tempo where you can obviously ride and still speak without having to catch your breath every 5 seconds. So you can ride and still speak to people next to you comfortably.
Yeah.
That's basically the pace that you want to be riding the first 100 Ks of the event.
And if your legs are burning, you're going too hard.
Yeah, then you've gone too hard, and you definitely need to go very easy for the next 30 minutes at least to try and get that lactic acid worked out of the muscles.
So, Jacques, just now you mentioned on Tonteldoos that you missed a water point and started running low on fuel. Let's say you bonk. How do you go about fixing it when you've bonked and you're in trouble?
Yeah,
and
so
the battery's died.
Yeah, that's very hard, especially in a race like Tonteldoos, and the place where I had the knock was at the hardest part of the event, basically. So mentally, it was quite hard. I was in the lead, luckily, so I had some motivation to keep going. That's the biggest thing, is to try and keep your motivation to keep going, and then just I would say, set points for yourself in the race. If you're looking ahead and you see a peak of a hill, just aim to that, and then when you get there, you choose the next point, and then when you get to that point, you choose the next point. Because if you have no food left and you've bonked, you need to you can't stop, because obviously you're not going to complete the event. You need to get to the next feed zone. So then just set small goals for yourself and try and reach every goal. And then once I got to the tech zone, I just had basically it was a 10-minute break, the longest that I wanted to stop, and I had a good lead, so I could use that. Obviously, if you're not going to be racing the race, you're going to have as much time as you need to recover. So then when you get to that point, and very well done if you did it, because once you bonk, it's really hard to keep going. Obviously,
Yeah.
I think I rode at about, let's say, 300 watts, 280 to 300 watts before that. And when I bonked, I had to do basically almost a third of that. So I rode about 150, or well, half of that, 150 watts for 20 odd K.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And it's not to say that the race is over. It's just there's no more carbohydrates left for your body to burn, the electrolytes. So I stopped at the next tech zone, and then I had tried to eat as much normal food, not gels. That's very important. Normal carbohydrates that gets taken up into the system, and they can last a bit longer. So I had as much carbohydrates as I can take. Just that little bit of Coke in the beginning to get the sugar level back up quickly. And then normal foods that the GI index, the glycemic index, is not too high, and it's an average index, so that it can fuel you again for the rest of the race. But then obviously try and have a lot of that, and then the body recovers quickly. I mean, I stood there for 10 minutes, had some Coke and all the food that I needed to take. And within basically 15 minutes of starting riding again, I was back up to 300, 320, and even feeling better than I did before I bonked. Right. So yeah, it's amazing how the body works.
That's very interesting. And you kind of had potatoes and whatever carbs were available at that.
Yes, I had banana bread and potatoes, and then obviously the small cans of Coke, not the big size, the small can of Coke in the beginning, just because the sugar levels were really low. And then I had the potatoes, baby potatoes, the banana bread, and some wine gums. That's it, yeah. But yeah, quite a lot of potatoes and banana bread. So.
So, Jacques, on the topic of pain, on discomfort, is how do you manage? I guess if you're an experienced rider, you probably have less pain of your backside and your legs, and maybe back and neck and arms and hands and that kind of thing. But how would you manage that pain, or recommend that? Because some people have run into back trouble and the saddle starts hurting. How do we manage that pain?
Yeah, so let's hope before the race you have most of that sorted out in terms of your bike setup. It can solve a lot of problems. I see a lot of people that are still riding big mountain bike events, long events, without having a bike set up. So that solves already a really good thing to do, and it solves a lot of those problems, especially if you have saddle pain or lower back pain. It's simple issues that can be sorted out with a bike fit. If you're having it in the race, it's not really much you can do. It's just you try and manage it with the route profile. If there's downhills, you try and stand a bit. A lot of things I see is people, if they're suffering, they're tensing up their shoulders and stuff like that. So the biggest thing is just to force yourself to focus, to relax the shoulders. Relax the shoulders, yeah. So that can obviously put a lot of relief on the neck. And then also to try and pedal, sit a bit upright, and push more with, basically how I can describe is to push the pedals from the hips. Right. So I can put a lot of relief on the lower back. A lot of people aren't pedaling out of the hips, so they're just pedaling with the quads, basically stomping on the pedals. And once you start engaging your glutes and basically pedaling out of the hips, it puts a lot of relief on the back, on the lower back. And then obviously a good tip is just to check your saddle tilt before the race, or definitely your saddle either 2 degrees nose down. That can also, I think a lot of people are riding either the saddle is being tilted a bit up. Maybe they don't even know it, but obviously you need to go and check that. So if the saddle level or 1 or 2 degrees down can also relieve a lot of that lower back issues.
Right, Jacques, and then one gets to the finish. And what do you do for recovery? That very first half an hour to an hour. Is it beer and pizza and hamburger, or a little bit more discipline, a lot of celebration, or what is your approach to that first hour? So after the
beer
race?
and a pizza is definitely not the worst recovery. You've got your carbohydrates there, and yeah, you've got a lot of carbohydrates there, so that's good. Now, I would say the best thing obviously is your recovery shake, carbohydrate recovery shake that you get from any of those brands in South Africa. They have some of them have a little bit of protein in, which is also good. You have your L-glutamine and amino acids in there, some salts, which is very good for the recovery. So yeah, I would say definitely the first thing you would want to take, because it gets taken up by the muscles much faster than, say, a pizza or a beer, is obviously your recovery shake. And then yeah, that's definitely the first thing you want to have. And then yeah, obviously the night you can have a whey protein shake, just to fix the muscles from breaking down in a crazy ultra marathon event like that. Protein the night of the race, after the race, and then obviously carbohydrates first to restore that muscle stores. So yeah, that's about it. And then obviously for the day afterwards, a lot of people would just be tempted into taking a complete rest day, but I would rather take a rest day 2 days after the race. So the day after the race, try and go riding for 30 minutes, even if it's just 30 minutes. Yeah, it's going to help with the recovery so much better. I mean, you see Oaks in the Tour de France or whatever races are on TV. Once they finish the 180k stage, mountain stage on one of those big races, they get off the bike and then they get back onto it on a trainer. And a lot of people don't understand that it is just to spin the legs and keep the blood flowing through the muscles, and then just try and take out as much of that lactic acid and stuff as possible. Just an easy spin, even if it's just 30 minutes, and then take the next day off.
And then, so my next question was going to be how many days should or can I rest after an ultra event? But you've answered that. I mean, I guess it probably also depends on what your next goal is.
Exactly. What's your next goals? If you have a race next weekend, if you have a race in 2 months or whatever, it all depends. Yeah. So definitely, I would take a day off, or even 2 days. Even if you have a race the next weekend, I would say the day after the race you can take off. the day after the race, you want to ride easy, 30 minutes to an hour, and then 2 days after the race, you can take off completely. And then, just start training slowly again the first couple of days.
But Jacques, thank you very much for joining me and for sharing all this valuable information. I'm sure there's someone out there who next weekend on Transbaviaans is going to use some of this advice to their benefit and have a great race as a result. So thank you for sharing your insights and your experience with me. And best of luck for Atterquas on Saturday. I hope you have a fantastic race on your mountain bike.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The weather is quite bleak. Yeah, it's been raining for 2 days.
Oh boy.
Yeah, let's hope that improves. But yeah, it's going to be a good race. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay, well, good luck. Thank you, Jacques.